Welcome back, everybody, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We have been talking about a variety of things today, but our seniors have been waiting patiently because we haven't touched on much that relates to them. But we are going to start talking about regular decision results. And here to do that is my colleague, Abigail Anderson, who also is a former Reed admissions officer. Hi, Abigail.
Hi, Beth. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you here. So, regular decision. Let's start with something really basic. When are those going to start coming in?
Oh my gosh, any day now. I
Yeah,
think
I think so.
in the next week or so by the time that this airs, right?
Yeah,
So you will definitely start hearing back, I would say, by the 15th. But all colleges have to have a decision to you by April 1st.
except
There
that,
are some changes to that this year, though, because it's COVID.
right,
So it could be a little bit later, but you'll probably get the bulk of your decisions in March.
right, exactly. Just so to clarify, there's a group of very select, all the Ivies plus a handful of other highly selective schools have announced, I think April 9th is when they're going to be announcing. And I love that they moved their deadline by 9 days, but they only moved the deadline by which you need to get back to them by three. So I don't
Super
know.
helpful.
Yeah, I don't really
Yeah.
know what I think about that. I guess they figure you want us more than we want you, so you'll deal with it. And one of a few things that I don't really love about that. But anyway, we have friends in that world, and they're typically not making the decision. And so that's what it is. All right, let's talk a little bit about what results students can expect just in very basic terms. They're going to get one of likely three replies. What are those typically going to be?
So the happiest one would be admit, and that
Yes.
means you're in and really no questions asked other than, are you going to enroll? The sad one on the far end of the spectrum would be deny, and that is a flat deny. That's a no.
Yep.
And then the tricky one, which is obviously what we're going to talk about today, is that one in the middle, that one that keeps you on the edge of your seat, which is waitlist.
Right. And yet, ironically, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and yet it's probably the last place you should be because, unfortunately, what a wait list typically is just a really nice way of saying no.
Yeah.
However, why don't we talk a little bit before we can kind of get into what do you do with these results? Why don't we talk a little bit about what we think might happen? And I will caveat all of this by saying that I thought when we went into the fall, I really truly did think that this might be a year where it might be a little bit easier to get into many, many schools. I was very, very wrong. It is not going to be easier at all at the most selective level.
Yeah.
Whether or not it will be at others is another question. But why don't we talk about what we're seeing in terms of what might happen in regular decision?
Oh my gosh. I just have to say the number of times this year that I've said, well, I wish I had a crystal ball because it
Yeah.
just feels like no predictions have come true, or very few have. But I do think because it's such an unpredictable year that colleges respond to unpredictability by waitlisting more students because it from an administrative and just a enrollment kind of yield side, it allows the school, it gives them a longer timeline to play around with and work with. They get to continue essentially making decisions from that wait list into it could be as late as the summer.
Right. I think one interesting thing too that is leading to that, and something I would point our listeners to, Georgia Tech has a really amazing admissions blog, written by their admissions office, where they focus on a lot of things, and it's not just Georgia Tech related. So if you're looking for another resource beyond our blog and our podcast, which I get, I highly recommend that. And they actually had a really great blog on just the other day about this phenomenon. Well, one thing that I would point to is that if you've paid attention to news, there were massive increases in applications at many schools. However, what they are seeing is that it wasn't a massive increased number of students submitting applications, right? So what instead happened is that the students who are applying to college apply to way more than they normally would. And that is a straight up nightmare for a college admissions professional who is trying to predict who is going to come. Because at the end of the day, if you applied to 15 schools, which by the way is way too many, then you can only go to one. So that's 14 other institutions who might have high hopes. You did everything right. You showed your demonstrated interest. You did all of these things. And then, but you can't go there because you have to pick one and 14 are going to lose out in that scenario. So curious about what, other thoughts about what we might start to see a lot of.
Yeah, and I think that point, the really interesting point that is so probably meaningful for listeners is that it was that really top tier, most selective schools that saw the big increases in applications. So if we're kind of trying to think down the pipeline strategically and just being rational about it, they're probably going to have bigger wait lists. And then we always, regardless of whether it's a COVID year or not, we
Mm-hmm.
talk about the domino effect of going to the wait list at the highly selective schools. So even if you didn't apply to the Ivies or the super selective state schools that saw those big increases, you might be affected by those jumps because you might end up on a wait list that at a less selective school that then loses students from their admitted class to a
Right.
school up the chain, and it can have a domino effect. So I think to kind of put a finer point on it, we're going to see more waitlist activity, and I think we might see it for longer into the summer. And as you said, I think most students don't want to be on a wait list and they don't want to sit there. And the advice, I know you give this advice, Beth, and I do I do as well, which is if you can fall in love with a school you're admitted to, like don't hang out on the wait list.
Right.
They're gonna just drag you along for a while and it might not feel great. So maybe try to deposit somewhere that's already said yes to you so that you're not riding this roller coaster.
Right. And you absolutely you have to, right? Because you must
Right.
deposit somewhere, understanding that if you get off the wait list, you will probably lose that money, but you can at some point withdraw that and then commit to a different school. I think too, if you find yourself on a lot of wait lists, I think I cannot stress enough the importance of don't do trophy hunting. Don't stay on every
Mhm.
single wait list because you really want to see what happens, because what you're doing, especially if those are not schools you have a school you really like and there's only two or three that you would change your mind if you got off the wait list, then let the ones go that you haven't. It's a kind thing to do. This is a whole other conversation we had on and back and
Yes.
forth internally here at College Coach earlier this week around doing something nice and doing something kind. And I would say nice is congratulating your best friend for being, getting into a school she really likes and being waitlisted at her top choice. Kind is you also get waitlisted at that school that is not your top choice and you turn the waitlist down, which increases the odds that your friend will get off of that waitlist. So do the kind thing. If you know that you are not getting in, there you can't brag. I guess you could, but the novelty of where you got in wears off almost instantly. It really becomes where are you going? And by the way, that wears off after a while. And then it's sort of what do you do with your life? What are you working on? What's your life all about? Like, so do the kind thing and turn down the schools where you know for sure you're not going to come off the wait list.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Send that good out, that ripple effect out into the world. I think we need more of it right
I
now.
think I completely agree with you. I think you are absolutely spot on. What about anything else that you would recommend as far as the waitlist is concerned and other things that students should do if they are waitlisted?
One thing really wish as a kind of field of college admissions that we talked more about, maybe by just changing the name of a wait list, it's really a wait pool. And I think
Yes.
that if you can adjust your mindset to this is not a ranked list of students who are waiting for a decision, it is more a massive swimming pool. and the admissions office is going to dive into that pool and look for particular things. They don't have a number one student they're going back to. They're
Right.
going to go back in and say, oh, we didn't get enough students for the math department, or for some reason this year nobody from Virginia enrolled. And so
Right.
they're going to go back into the pool and look for the student from Virginia or the student who can join the math department. And so really reminding yourself that it is not a list. You are not being ranked. And as you always say, Beth, you might be a tuba and a trombone year, and you don't have a ton of control over what happens with your application in that
Right.
group of students waiting to hear back.
Exactly. I think you can send back the, whatever it is, if you check a box and on the portal, or there's a card, old school, that you have to mail back, or whatever it is you need to do to let them know you're going to remain on the wait list. I would do that. I would send an update, a letter of continued interest. It should be brief. You are not writing a 3-page, sort of thesis here. It's a couple of paragraphs. Excited to still be under consideration. Here's what I've been up to since I submitted my application. If admitted off the wait list, I would come, if that's true. Please don't say it if it's not true, but if that's true, I would say that. And then, then move on to falling in love with the schools that admitted you, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I will say I worked at a school where saying if you would enroll, if you were admitted, did make a difference.
Hmm.
But if we felt like it was a lie, or we called you up and it was not true, it made a difference in a very negative way. We did not appreciate that. But I agree, saying it if it's true can be
Right.
actually a pretty big game changer.
And actually, good point about if you called them up. In fact, when I was at Penn, that's what we would do to gauge interest. So
Yes.
before we actually officially pulled someone off the wait list, we would call and say, are you still interested? We would stop short of getting an official commitment because the student still had to get the actual acceptance and make that choice. But if they were somewhat ambivalent or unsure, we moved to somebody else who was interesting, because we figured that at that later stage, it was likely that many students would have fallen in love with the choice that they had made already. And so we really were looking for who really truly still wants to be here. So make sure you answer that call if it comes, and make sure and prepare yourself for that. Have conversations. If I got the call today, would I still go? And that answer could be one thing in mid-May and something completely different on August 1st. So, it's a constant conversation, I would say.
We did the exact same thing at Reed. I think very common practice.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would add is please check your voicemails. Have the voicemail box set up. Check your voicemail. The number of times I would call and say, well, we were going to offer you a spot on the wait list, but you didn't pick up and you didn't call me back. So we went to somebody else.
Right?
It's pretty, I mean, like, it happens. So I know my teenage nieces and nephews don't love voicemail, but like, please,
Yep. Leave one. Or
like,
answer it.
have one or answer it. Yeah.
Yes. Good
Yeah.
point. Don't leave one, answer it. And actually, if you call back and you don't reach them, do leave a message.
Leave a
Don't.
voicemail and
Right.
say who you are, because
Right.
our old school phones on our desks don't have caller ID.
Right. Right. Really
Yeah.
quickly, what about if you get denied? I can't count the number of times a student will say, I got denied, I'm going to appeal. Let's talk about the reality of appealing a denial.
I've never seen it work.
I have not either.
I mean, I guess like there's an exception to every rule. Like maybe you realize your high school counselor sent the wrong transcript or something crazy, but I think it's really hard to take bad news. It does not feel good. But I have never seen that route work.
Yeah.
So a no is a no here.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think it's not but didn't they see how wonderful I was? They got the wrong transcript, right? If you can
Right.
pinpoint that something went really wrong, then by all means try it. And there are schools that do have formal appeal processes, but especially when they don't have that, the likelihood that it would work. I've never been on either end of a successful appeal. So, and
No.
I've been doing this work for 18 years. So that will tell you something. All right. Abigail, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. This was really fun.
Awesome. It's always great to have you on the show. And I want to thank all my other guests today. Next week, Ian is going to be here hosting. He's actually going to be talking about developing writing skills in preparation for writing the college essay. I think a really great segment and hope you guys will tune in. We're also going to be doing listener Q&A. So if you have questions for us, you can always share them on, if you're not following us on Facebook, you should, or on Instagram, you should. And you can put questions in those places. You could also email us at gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. So all ways in which you can interact with us. Like I said, follow us on Facebook, read our blog, check that out. And then don't forget, we are here every Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific.